Right. So this is a review of Naked Lunch by David Cronenberg. David Cronenberg, you may remember from A History of Violence or Eastern Promises. Eastern Promises was more commercial, more popular, but A History of Violence is probably his best film, in my opinion. He did Maps to the Stars recently. He did Cosmopolis. He did uh, uh, Crimes of the Future was his new one, which is a remake of his original Crimes of the Future. But this time it was with Viggo Mortensen and Kirsten Stewart. It was interesting. It was definitely interesting. It was a David Cronenberg film. It was on point, but it wasn't one of his best films. A lot of people were disappointed. And a lot of people, for some strange reason, couldn't handle it because they expected something else from David Cronenberg. Like, he's the shock man. He's the horror. He's the morbid drama. He's the thriller. He's the action that goes gross. Like, it's David Cronenberg. Okay. He also did Videodrome, which is quite known, and Crash in 1996. There was another film called Crash that is unrelated. So the 1996 one is about sexual fetishes to do with car crashes. Probably the most famous David Cronenberg film is The Fly, the 1986 remake with Gene Davis and Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, The Fly, the gross one. Vincent Price was in the original. It was a very old film, but David Cronenberg's version was a super brilliant, classic, romance horror. Frankenstein movie, actually, by Stephen King's, Archetype. It was a werewolf, Jekyll and Hyde, but it was also a Frankenstein. It was a mix of the Frankenstein monster and the werewolf Jekyll and Hyde monster. So Frankenstein is Frankenstein's monster. His motive is to punish the creator for creating him, because of the sin of thinking you're God. In Aliens, the sin is greed or avarice. It's basically the same. It's the Frankenstein monster. So since the protagonist is a scientist, then Frankenstein's monster is also Dr. Frankenstein. But he's also Jekyll and Hyde or werewolf monster because when he strips away his conscience, he becomes the monster because man without conscience, i.e. a werewolf, i.e. a Jekyll and Hyde, is a monster. Without your conscience, you are free to be pure insect. And that's my view of The Fly. But The Fly is quite a popular movie. So it's probably David Cronenberg's most well-known movie. So if you don't know David Cronenberg, think The Fly. But then go further than that because David Cronenberg is much more than just The Fly. And he also did Scanners, which is a 1981 film. He did a ton of movies around then. The Broad, Shivers, some really weird movies. There's this movie that came out recently called Slither, and it's basically a ripoff of it's either Shivers or Rabbit or it's not The Broad. I know it's not The Broad because The Broad is
me. Words that I'll dictate to you.
the guy who died who was in Gladiator. I think he's in it. Laurence Olivier? No, I think I'm messing up the name. Anyway, he's in it, and it's about the concept is like there's this scientific theory that's just made up that if you could physicalize, like materialize your mental illness, you could kill it and then you wouldn't be mental anymore. The problem is, just because you can materialize the mental illness doesn't mean you can kill it, because it's just as powerful in the material world as it is in the mental world. So and it's a horror film. It's a David Cronenberg horror film, and it's called The Brood. You got to see it. It's way classic, like B grade compared to what David Cronenberg does now, or even did 20 years ago. But conceptually, it's brilliant, and there's a lot of really charming things about it. Anyway, this is Naked Lunch. So it's based on the William Burroughs novel, which was huge, The Beat Generation, with Kerouac and Ginsberg and etc. So here's my review of Naked Lunch, the movie. Peter Weller explores and displays an evolving character of absolute humility in William Lee, the stand-in for the writer whose life and work this film is based on, famous Beat Generation poet William Burroughs. He is a pest exterminator specializing in killing bugs with a yellow sulfuric powder which certain people have taken to shooting up. William Lee is an intellectual who retreated from the writing and junk game to work day-to-day at a job. After the discovery that his powder is being used as junk, various agencies start to look closer at him despite the fact that he's been clean for a while now. The rest of the film is a sprawling, sexually ambiguous hallucination. I'm addicted to a drug that doesn't exist, he says. Bill contracts the help of a GP to get a drug that will help him and his wife Joan, Judy Davis, get off the bug powder. Dr. Benway, Roy Scheider from Jaws, and Sequest ESV, serves the purpose of introducing Bill to the ideas which constitute the rest of the film. The source of the drugs taken from the mashed up bodies of alien bugs. Bill is put to work writing reports for the agency. The conspiracy is a drug hierarchy, an industrial machine comprised of a criminal organization called Interzone, which is also the name of Bill's sanctuary, Panama-esque fictional country where young boys and drugs are in sufficiently edible supply, and the agency which hunts Interzone agents who Bill supposedly works for. Yes, it's like a paranoid version of Monty Python. He communicates with the agency via his living giant bug typing machine, which may in fact be his muse, and he writes reports which he sends to his friend back in America and promptly forgets having written them. The trouble starts early on when Bill gets high on bug powder with his wife and accidentally shoots her in the head based on an actual event in Burroughs' life during a William Tell routine. So he has to leave town. One of the things I love about this movie is the romanticism of drugs, deviant sex, and escape from the government and conservative society. In Interzone, everything is cheap, everything is done, everything is okay, a junkie's wet dream. The poetry of the work that inspired this film is equal only to the disturbing, creative, and powerfully disgusting, shocking imagery. I'm not going to be showing you any of that because I don't want to give away the best bits or the best visual bits. Because the best moments in this film are not effects. The best moments in this film come from emotional moments through the story, as with most films. But there are some great effect shots, and I don't want to give away the best ones. I want you to watch the film. Bits of this poetry are spread through the film, mostly as Bill's dialogue and rants to impress people to figure out his own mind, to separate the real from the fabricated. Only one scene doesn't play now as well as when I first saw it. Eve's Julian Sands having violent sex with one of the boys who Bill befriends in Interzone as payment for some information Bill was instructed to collect. The physical special effects of this scene do not stand up to today's technology and craft. They look a bit puppety. However, the emotion of this scene is not lost. That was the one effect shot that I was going to show you, but I'm not going to now. Okay. I give this film 5 stars. It's brilliant.
Like
It's
a little
must-see. You
kitten.
have to
I call
watch it.
because it had this little white
But I'll
claws.
include a few clips
And
in
so
this video.
this mittens was I hadn't had it very long before it was killed by Mrs. Adams driving a lot.
Okay, now the next review, yes, you get 2 reviews this time. The next review, it's not a
By
5-star
Chrysler,
film,
it's
it's a 4-star film, but it's
And,
still a must.
It's a great.
It's
Mrs.
good,
Adams
and
great
everything is
performance.
going
He
to
had two
fine, and
daughters
it's
that my
by
brothers and I
Steven
called
Soderbergh.
big sisters. I don't think they look like pigs. It's the most
The film
iconic
is
ever.
told in excerpt
And
from
Mrs.
interviews
Adams was
of and
mortified.
live
She
monologues
realized what
by
she'd done. She
Sporting
stopped the
Grey,
car and
telling
she
the
chased me.
story
I
of
ran.
his life, as he does over and over again. And every time he manages to make it new. Every time he tells a new story, even though the old myth of every writer only tells one story. Sporting Grey does only tell one story, but he manages, he's like some kind of Aladdin genie. Like, he manages magically to make it new every single time. Okay, this is a tribute to his life after his death in 2004. Coming up to his last, he was in a car accident which put him in the hospital. He was on crutches, performing monologues which had evolved into interviews with people from the audience. He had grown tired of talking about himself. Gray became famous for his unique art form. He sits at a table before a live audience and tells a story, which he calls poetic journalism. It's prose-like autobiography. He also works as an actor, and he writes huge manuscripts which he turns into performances. Two of his films which are exceptional include Monster in a Box, which is one of my favorite all-time movies, and Swimming to Cambodia, which I haven't seen yet. They're both just Gray talking for an hour and a half. Part of his magic is that it's that simple, and he still manages to keep your attention. That's another magical thing about him. Entertain and emotionally affect his audience for that whole time. He makes it new, and he keeps your interest, even though it's just him sitting at a table talking or reading or reciting. There is a rhythm to his performances, which is set by design, but still I don't think someone who doesn't like the theater would want to sit through one man talking for that long with nothing else going on. However, I would find it hard to believe that anyone could get bored with a Sporting Grey story. Not just the way he tells it, but his stories themselves are entertaining, expertly told, intellectually satisfying, but full of sexual humor and anxiety, scandalous, funny, drugs, uptight conservatism, by upbringing as an American upper middle class thrust into the world of the liberal crazies. A world where you might find settings like Interzone from William Burroughs' Naked Lunch and Cuba from Julian Schnabel's Before Night Falls. Both brilliant movies, 5-star movies. This is the world that Gray talks about. He also talks about his home life, which is and was full of conflict. His mother was psychotic and committed suicide. Gray himself had struggled with mental illness, and he opens the book of himself, honest and genuine. Sometimes shame might be there, but he bravely faces it and pushes past, never resisting, never holding back out of fear and insecurities, although he's aware and markedly upfront that he is insecure and afraid as a person. It's common to want people to think that you're cool. Gray knows he's not cool. He's never been cool. And he is open about all the little weaknesses that make him not cool. His homoerotic experiences, his fear of women, his late blooming, his belief that he's more of a hardworking writer than a talented writer. He's unafraid and exceptional as a performer, a poet, and a genuine person. And yet he is afraid. He is afraid. And he faces that. He accepts it. He knows he is afraid, and he acts as if he wasn't. Watching this film inspires the need to find out more about a man whose life was about the performance, whose life was the performance. And in his later days, he seemed to discover what life was supposed to be about. But his work shines, and discovering more of it allows us to keep him alive despite death. Yes, this is a man who died. Okay, 4 stars, but a must-see. A must-see. You have to see it.
Please, if you like, and please do subscribe or consider subscribing, because I upload videos pretty much every Tuesday, but sometimes other days as well. See ya.